I want us to be both being shot together.
It's a bit close, man.
Push me.
Get away. Hello and welcome to the latest opening bell. Tris Dixon is not too far away actually. He's out in the office, but he's snowed under with work, so he's handed over the reins to myself and John Dennen. John, you've been eager to get involved in some podcast action, haven't you?
I just don't like being out of the loop.
I know.
I want to get in the mix.
I know. Well, you're right in the thick of things now.
I'm in your face.
What have you been doing? What did you do last Friday?
I went to Birmingham and attempted to exercise with hot prospect Cal Yafai.
How did that go?
Very badly for me. I died after one station of the circuit. Well, not literally died, obviously.
No, I can see that.
But yeah, no, it was, it's surprisingly hard boxing.
Yeah, isn't it? And can readers, stroke listeners, see the results of your hard work at any point?
We have some humiliating video footage which will be coming to boxingnewsonline.net. over the coming days, this week or next week.
/Dennen makes a fool of himself.
It looks like I can't even jump. For the record, I can jump. I was just so tired. Like I was just.
Did all your best work off camera, I bet.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They didn't film my first attempt at the circuit. I really crunched through that.
Okay, right. Okay, let's move on. There was some action at the weekend, and it turned out. The main fight obviously was Canelo Alvarez coming back and stopping Alfredo Angulo. It was, I thought, going to be more competitive than it turned out to be. Were you impressed with Saul Alvarez?
Very impressed. He looked really strong, really fast as well. But Angulo didn't look very good at all. His punches seemed sort of flapping his jab. I thought Angulo looked so much better against Lara when he dropped him. When he dropped Erislandia Lara twice, and I wasn't expecting it to be so one-sided.
No, and it's interesting you say that about Angulo. Tris and I were chatting last week, and I gave Angulo a decent shot in the fight, but he's had that tough fight. You mentioned that fight with Lara where he did look a lot better. He had a tough fight against James Kirkland. He took some severe punishment against Alvarez. Is he finished? Is he not working well with Virgil Hunter? What do you think the problem is?
Yeah, I don't know. Lara and Canelo are high-level fighters, so sort of if he takes a step down in class, he might start looking good again. So I'm not sure if he is finished, but I don't think we want to see him taking another beating like that again. Yeah. I don't know what to make of Virgil Hunter. It's hard to know unless you're sort of in the gym and can see them at work, because these boxers aren't fools. There must be a reason why they're there in his gym, and they must feel they're getting something from it. And a lot of times it can just be, you can sort of overpraise a trainer when he's got good fighters, but you can also over-criticise him when the results aren't going his way, and it's ultimately sort of up to the boxer. The boxer deserves the credit and also some of the criticism if it doesn't go well.
Yeah, I agree with you. But for me, Virgil Hunter is yet to really prove his worth, isn't he, as a trainer? I wasn't convinced by some of the things you were saying to Amir Khan in the Julio Diaz fight. But the thing is, what you say there as well is that when things aren't going a fighter's way, it's a bit too easy to criticise the trainer for the advice they're giving, isn't it?
And when you say he hasn't proved his worth, you mean with the other fighters, bar Andre Ward. Yeah. It could be just those two click and have a great understanding.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was strange at the Khan fight, wasn't it? That he was sort of not getting in the ring.
Yeah,
that was weird. At least he was in the ring with Angulo.
Yeah, I know. And you're talking about that. That was bizarre because, for Khan and for 99% of fighters, they're anticipating, their mentor or their leader to be kind of in the ring with them, and then having to kind of turn your head and listen to what the trainer's saying. It did seem like a very, very odd way to do things back then.
Yeah. And Hunter, he does talk a good game.
Absolutely,
I find him, intelligent and convincing to listen to.
Yeah.
But then I suppose with this Angulo fight, he was sort of more trying to motivate Angulo rather than giving the sort of from the clips I saw of him in the ring, rather than giving him sort of technical guidance. But maybe he felt that was the right thing to do at the time.
I mean, with Alvarez, for me, the jury's still out. He was, I think it's fair in saying, on the occasion he fought Floyd Mayweather, he was outclassed, despite that one, very, very obscure scorecard. You can now perhaps say that Angulo's style was made for Canelo. Ideally, what would be the next step now for Alvarez, so we can kind of get a handle on exactly, where he's going and how good he is?
The panel in the magazine, sort of the general consensus wants to see him in with the winner of Cotto or Sergio Martinez. That would be a huge fight. But it's easy to forget because Canelo's had so many fights and recently been at the top level for all his recent fights. How young he is? Was he 23?
Yeah.
I mean that's pretty incredible. I mean you could forgive him a sort of a couple of easier fights really, because he's fought Mayweather. He's fighting at that elite level, and what were you doing when you were 23?
Let's not talk about that.
I tried to think exactly. It's pretty amazing. So presumably at that age, he's still improving. Like he's off his peak. So he could be something very special indeed.
Yeah, and he also, I think, looking at his frame and what have you, he's certainly slowly but surely growing towards middleweight limit, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I think he'd be a cracking addition to the middleweight ranks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how exciting would he be for that division? But I suppose he should be criticised as well for coming in a pound heavy for this fight.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's not like it's the weight limit is announced on the day of the weigh-in. These guys know what they're supposed to weigh, and it's bad discipline whichever way you look at it, isn't it?
Yeah, we're trying to sneak an advantage, like the dastardly Salido.
Actually, let's get your take on Orlando Salido before we move on. You big fan of Lomachenko. I know that you followed his career.
Yeah.
For a long time, which has been going on a lot longer than his two professional fights. Obviously, he was an amazing amateur. What did you make of his effort, first of all, against Salido?
I was expecting him to perform better. I thought he'd certainly be good enough to win 7 of the rounds and at least win on points. And so he did seem surprisingly tentative. But having said that, Salido had come in heavier on the way in and was a lot bigger than him on the night, which is a problem. Maybe that was hard for Lomachenko to deal with. And Salido got away with so many low blows. Yeah. And, in the last round, Lomachenko was beating the snot out of him.
He was. Can you... It's difficult, isn't it? Because the weight makes it a murky, grey area. But I also think what's been overlooked in this slightly is the fact that pretty much everybody was expecting Lomachenko to win. Can we give Salido any credit for upsetting the odds?
I mean, yeah, if being a clever pro is not making your agreed weight and hitting someone below the belt, fine, he's a clever pro. But judging on sporting terms, he's not a gentleman.
And that's the most important thing.
Exactly.
I don't want to talk about it for too long, but I mean you've touched upon kind of the whole weight issue. Bob Mee mentioned it in last week's Boxing News. Mickey Van has mentioned it in his online column this week. Should we be thinking about going back to same-day weigh-ins? Obviously, the reason it was switched was for safety's sake. If it was up to you, what would you do with that?
It is a hard one because safety is the most important thing. Maybe also having a second weigh-in on the morning of the fight, so you can't blow up too much and have to be too much. So there can't be too big a difference between the two weights. Maybe that's something to look at. Yeah. But if everyone could just be a professional and come in at the agreed weight, we'd have a sport.
I know, and that is an issue with boxing, isn't it? There are so many factors like that where there doesn't seem to be an obvious solution to the problem.
Yeah. But there is an obvious problem, like with Lomachenko on the night. It was I think a lightweight against a welterweight. If you look at the weights.
Okay, moving on. There was some action as well at Liverpool, kicking off a busy period for the city. Paul Butler was heading up that show. He looked pretty good.
Yeah, and he's looked pretty good for all his recent fights, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Ready to step up.
Reckon?
Well, if it's against Stewie Hall, then yeah.
What are you saying about Stewie Hall?
Don't dare to tell me, man. I'm saying Butler Stewie Hall is a competitive fight.
Okay. Is Stewie Hall Martin Ward a competitive fight?
Less so. I think Stewie Hall. Well, yeah, it is. I think that the criticisms of the fight are, are they even the best in Britain in that division, let alone the sort of the top of the world?
Yeah.
I can see the sort of the appeal of it in the Northeast because an all Northeast world title fight, but it has been criticised generally, and I'm sort of think, it'll probably be better for Stewie Hall to be in with a tougher opponent because it would be a more credible fight. But boxing is prize fighting. He needs to put bums on seats. Maybe this is what they needed to do.
Kevin Satchell was also on the bill. I was impressed with Kevin Satchell earlier on in his career. I think it was Chris Edwards he beat quite convincingly about 18 months ago, I believe. And at that point, I did genuinely think that Satchell could go beyond domestic level. What's your opinion of Satchell?
It's hard to tell. I mean, there are not a lot of guys around. Not a lot of little guys around. So maybe you've sort of got to move him fast. So I don't have a strong opinion as Kevin Satchell. Obviously, I rate Butler quite highly because he's looked really classy in the way he's dealt with his opponents. So I think we want to see Satchell in a more meaningful fight, but against who? Like who are the opponents around we could put him in with?
It's a difficult one. But I still think he's got a lot of talent. I think he's certainly one to watch.
There are a lot of good fighters in Liverpool at the moment. Sort of Liverpool boxing is buzzing.
Yeah, definitely it is. Okay, let's move on to what's happening this weekend. We'll come back to Liverpool shortly, but first of all, if we'll just take a little trip over to Puerto Rico, where Danny Garcia defends his title against Mauricio Herrera. On paper, it's not that, for me at least, it's not that much of an enticing matchup, considering what Garcia has done recently. He's kind of moved to the top of boxing. You can make a case for him being in the top 15, top 20 pound for pound with what he's done recently. But what do you make of this fight, Garcia Herrera?
Like you say, I'm confused by it in that it's quite, after beating Lucas Matisse in the style he did, it's a weird sort of step down with, it's not an easy fight, but that makes it a banana skin. It's got banana skin written all over it. I mean, I'm sure he'll come through it, even though Garcia can be a bit hit and miss. Like, he's been really good in, against Matisse in some of those big fights, but he can also fight down to an opponent's level. But then, given the split between Top Rank and Golden Boy, there aren't that many available top light welterweights for him to fight.
I know, and that's the thing. It does seem like a lot of the guys he wants to fight are in the rival camp, as it were. Let's take politics out of it. Let's make this an ideal world, which can be difficult in boxing, I know, but let's make this an ideal world for a second. Presuming Garcia gets past Herrera, who would you like to see Garcia in with?
Yeah, well, we asked on the Boxing News Facebook page, who do you think would win, Garcia Tim Burry? That's a great fight, well-matched fight. That would be good. And then Pacquiao, all those kind of all of those would be interesting. All the sort of top ranked fighters, Provodnikov. But yeah, you can go in with any of the top guys.
Yeah, there was some talk, and although it was clearly just talk for the issues that we've just spoke about, but Garcia seemed to me, out of everybody that was in and around Floyd Mayweather's weight class, seemed to be the most deserving. But it also seemed to be that on paper it would be yet another fairly one-sided victory for Floyd Mayweather were they to meet. Would you give Garcia any hope of being the man to take away Floyd's unbeaten record should they ever clash?
Yeah, not at the moment, but in future, especially, Floyd is getting older. Can he stay at the top? All this, how much longer can he stay at the top for? Garcia, it's more. I think you look at him and you don't think of it. Well, maybe other than a hard left hook, you don't really think of any outstanding attribute. Whereas, it would probably be a more competitive fight than Amir Khan versus Floyd Mayweather, but at least people can say Khan's got speed. What's Maidana got? He's powerful, if ponderous and predictable. Whereas with Garcia, what's his strength and what's the Mayweather weakness that he can get?
It's a difficult one. I think with Garcia, and he is still young, and he has shown he was an underdog going into the fight with Eric Morales, the first Eric Morales fight. And although he won that fight, he wasn't overly convincing, or at least he wasn't convincing in a way that you thought he would go on to be a superstar. But he has steadily improved, and there were signs that there were more facets to his game in the Matisse fight. It wasn't quite the all-out, mindless brawl that many were predicting. Garcia did fight quite intelligently there. But I guess it's such another level to then improve to the point where you're in with a shout of beating Floyd Mayweather, isn't it?
Yeah, because he's an intelligent fighter for sure, but then Mayweather's sort of the mastermind in that front. But Mayweather likes people who bring something for the all-access documentaries beforehand, and you've got Danny Garcia's father, who would be entertaining, if not car crash TV.
Yeah. I mean, speaking about Floyd Mayweather, we've got a little article about Floyd in our news section this week, more or less, in in a nutshell, basically saying I'll do what I like because I deserve to and I've earned that right. What do you make of what he said about the whole? I mean, I've spoke about it, Trisha spoke about it. We haven't got your take about it on the podcast in terms of initially there was that whole, now infamous internet poll that he created in order to apparently decide who he would be in the ring with next. He ignored that and went with the loser of that poll, Marcus Maidana, ultimately, and then made some what perhaps could be slightly tongue-in-cheek remarks to Amir Khan via Twitter, saying, well, if you fight Adrian Broner on the undercard and you beat him, which you won't, then I'll fight you next. If you're Amir Khan, how would you react to all this?
I don't know. Unleash your foul-mouthed Twitter tirade. But there's not a lot Amir can do. He's been sort of toyed with by Mayweather. It was Mayweather's own poll that Khan did win, even though the sort of other polls and other websites favoured Maidana. There's not, Khan's hands are tied, really. He can't force his way into a Mayweather fight, or he can't talk his way any closer to it than he is. So he's sort of got to go off and just try and find a decent opponent that people are going to be interested in. In its own right, Khan-Broner's a really good fight. People will want to watch that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's looking like Louis Collazo is most likely next for Khan, and that again that's hard for Amir. Collazo is no mug. Did really well against Ortiz, and fought recently. Khan hasn't fought since April 2013. I think my preferred fight for him would be a massive Kell Brook fight. In the UK, that would be huge, but it seems pretty clear that Khan's not interested in that. He wants to be fighting in the States. Maybe he wants a fight that will get him close to a world title, but
it's an odd one. I mean, you would think that surely he will make more money from a Kell Brook fight, and this, for me, this Louis Collazo fight is a massive banana skin. I mean, who do you make a favourite in that? Collazo's been there and done it. Never really been beaten that convincingly. I think Shane Mosley turned in a pretty good performance a few years ago in one of Mosley's final good performances. Collazo, stylistically as well, I think, if Khan was to win that convincingly, it would be a really, really good result for him. But Kell Brook, it seems like there's a lot more. There would be more reward, and arguably, I think with the styles, less risk. What's your take on that?
I agree with you in all things, but particularly with that, like lucrative, could be on pay-per-view over here. If you had it in Sheffield or something like that, where it can't last for, get a big crowd on the night. And Kell Brook's very good and a hard hitter, but I don't think he's as awkward or difficult as Collazo, and and there are question marks about Kell Brook in the second half of a fight, his fitness and conditioning, whereas we know Khan can fight hard to the end. Probably sets a bit too high a pace, but he's got sort of heart and can cope with it. So it's a shame it doesn't look like it's happening, but no one listens to me.
No, I know that feeling. I do know that feeling very, very well. But Mook, if we go back to this Puerto Rican belt, and the thing which kind of salvages it for me is the undercard. Two really intriguing fights on there. First of all, we'll start with Deontay Wilder and Malik Scott at heavyweight. Malik Scott showed his ability in the Derek Chisora loss. The ending was obviously controversial. Has Malik Scott got what it takes to take Deontay Wilder beyond a few minutes?
I think so, because I think you'd have to sort of just be intimidated and capitulate straight away for him to be taken out quickly. He is awkward. He's not an easy opponent. It took, he was winning the rounds initially against Chisora until Chisora got motoring, and the stoppage was sort of relatively controversial at the time. But I think the British journalist ringside, I was there for that. Scott. His corner was kicking up more of a fuss at the stoppage than he was, so I think he'd sort of become disheartened by that point. So I think once Wilder gets some hurting bombs in on him, then he's in trouble. But I would think he'd make life difficult for Wilder, especially because Wilder, this is given Wilder's paltry opposition so far. This is his biggest test.
You mentioned there Wilder's paltry opposition. It's, Malik Scott has had a lot more, say a lot more. Has he had more fights, actually, having said that? No, he hasn't. He's had less fights, but he's been around a lot longer time. But his opposition as well, for such a long time, you could say, was paltry. And something that was interesting, one of my favourite parts of the magazine is the 60-second interview, which is always, you can always find on the last page. Toughest opponent you faced. And he actually says that Derek Chisora was his toughest opponent. Now that's quite rare for a boxer, and remembering a boxer's ego and their pride. Normally, in that question, you'll find the answer will be somebody they've beaten the bejabbers out of.
Yeah,
they're very rarely honest and say, the guy that beat me was actually the toughest opponent. But to be fair, if you look at Scott's record, Chisora is by far and away the toughest test on there. So for that reason, I think you've got to favour Wilder. He's obviously got a lot of confidence behind him, and he's that one-punch power. And even though it's a very crude kind of wrecking ball type of shot that he throws, it's ludicrously effective. Presuming he wins this, Deontay Wilder. I know you and I have spoke about Deontay Wilder versus Vladimir Klitschko in the future. It would be a mouth-watering fight if Wilder could, say, blast Malik Scott out early on.
Would it be mouth-watering?
I think so. I'm a big heavyweight fan. I enjoy a big heavyweight fight. I'm craving one to be held on American soil again. And the build-up, I think they could certainly sell the fight.
Like you say, getting a big hitter like Wilder in the mix makes it interesting.
Yeah. I think ideally for that fight, though, to perhaps be quite as mouth-watering as I'm making out, is you would need Wilder to impress against Scott. Then I think the plan would be for him to take on the winner of Bermane Stiverne, Chris Arreola. And then if he was to say blast out Arreola or Stiverne, then you've got a fight on your hands, haven't you, against Klitschko?
I'm down with that.
I'm glad. Finally, on that bill, Juan Manuel Lopez against Daniel Ponce de Leon. Now this is a rematch of a 2008 encounter, which really, really put Juan Manuel Lopez on the map when he blasted out Ponce de Leon in the opening round. A lot has happened since then. Repeat or revenge?
When a boxer's knocked someone out, it's usually repeat, isn't it? I think, or is that just in my imagination?
Usually it is repeat. but very often, I mean, it's not. There's a lot has gone on, and quite a few years has passed. Generally, a rematch will happen within 2 or 3 years at the most. This is what now, coming up to 6, and Lopez is coming off in his 2 most recent big fights 2 fairly damaging stoppage losses. So, repeat or revenge?
I'm going to go with repeat, but less. Yeah, but I suppose if it's less impressive, that's a sign of how much Lopez has slipped, or the toll of taking those losses.
Yeah, it's for me, it's an interesting fight. Ponce de Leon, there was an interview on the website where Ponce de Leon basically said, you can't take anything. He caught me cold. You can't take anything from a 1-round fight. This is going to go longer, and you'll see the real me. Ponce de Leon has been chugging away for such a long time now. I think this would be the end for him if he was to lose. I think for both of them, actually. I think if Lopez loses, it's over for him. Ponce de Leon loses, definitely over for him. But will we? I mean, not so long ago we were hoping to see a Yuriorkis Gamboa Lopez showdown. Could we perhaps still see that?
I don't know what's going on with Gamboa though. He seems like a wrong 'un, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So maybe if Gamboa can't get anyone else to fight, it might eventually happen. But boxing's a sort of, it's a cruel business. You sort of quickly forget. Like, a few years ago, we were all talking about Juan Manuel Lopez wanting that fight. Now he's had he's been tarnished by these defeats, and we just don't care anymore. Not to be cruel, but it happens. Like 1 minute, 1 minute you're top of the world, everyone's talking about you, and that's this is what such a crazy sport. One big loss suddenly, or one poor performance, we move on. We find someone else to get excited about, like Paul Butler. Like Paul
Butler, and kind of neatly bringing us back to Liverpool. There is someone who's got to make a massive statement this weekend. Is Tony Bellew, a friend of Boxing News. You spoke to him while writing your preview of his return against Valery Brudov. Now, without giving too much away, or rather not giving too much of the preview away, but what is Bellew's mindset going into this really, really crucial fight?
Well, it's a new look Tony Bellew, he claims, at a new weight. Will he, it's sort of a big jump to make up in weight. Will this power come with him? Will he be able to handle the bigger men, or was he draining himself to make light heavyweight? He's tried to sort of not use it as an excuse. He's been sort of complimentary about how good Adonis Stevenson was, but he's also said that making the weight didn't help. We will see. I suppose the intrigue is really, we expect him to win, so obviously losing would be a disaster.
Yeah.
A win is good because Brudov's a solid opponent to come back off a loss against. If Bellew dazzles, then we could start to believe he could make he could make a world title run. If he struggles, the British rival Nathan Cleverly is still around. So again, there is no love lost there. So that's almost more, that would again be an entertaining route for him to take. So, but I suppose they need Bellew to be spectacular because this bill has taken a hammering with injuries and dropouts. Since we went to press, Paul Smith is off. I was looking forward to hearing his entrance.
Real Gone Kid, classic.
I like it.
Classic. Moving back to Bellew though, and the thing is which is different from pretty much every other weight class. Very often, fighters will naturally grow out of the weight class that they've been performing in for the majority of their career. Often a fighter will move up a weight division because he feels like he needs to a change of scenery almost. He needs to freshen up a bit, for want of a better term. But the thing is, with moving from light heavyweight to cruiserweight, it's a 25-pound jump. Now, if you go from light heavyweight downwards, you're basically looking at 7 or 8 pounds at the most for each jump. 25 pounds is huge. Now, even though Tony Bellew has always been tight at light heavyweight, how is he going to cope and with that kind of jump? And is he going to be coming in around the 200 pound limit, or is he going to be kind of keeping it a bit more sensible and coming in at something like 185? And if so, is that going to affect his performance against some of the bigger cruiserweights?
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see. I don't know. But those are the big questions. Because I mean, he never looked. I know it was hard. I know it's hard for him to make the weight, but because he never looked massive, it makes me worry that it'll be hard for him up at cruiserweight. But having said all that, he was, after the Stevenson loss, he was kind of running out of options at light heavyweight if he wants to get to a world title. You know, Hopkins and Shumenov are fighting each other, but it seems unlikely that Bellew would be able to get in the mix with them. After what happened against Stevenson, you're not going to put him in with Kovalev. Are the cruiserweight world champions easier? Maybe in terms of skill, but not in terms of size. You love Marco Huck, so...
I do love Marco Huck.
Who could stand against Marco Huck?
Probably the greatest fighter of all time, Marco Huck.
After Ian Napper. Your other favourite fighter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not sure. I'll be interested to see, and there's a press release that went out today about Bellew, in that, you know, he hasn't got to worry about the scales, he's eating well, he's a lot happier, but wasn't a lot of the effectiveness with Tony Bellew, with just how damn angry he used to be.
Yeah, I still think he's an angry man. He always sounds, highly motivated.
Yeah.
So, he must be out to prove a point. So he's definitely, it was a loss to Stevenson and, and a stoppage defeat, but it's not the end of Tony Bellew. He's as always, seems well up for it.
Yeah.
But then he's just got to start fighting up to his words, if that makes grammatical sense.
Do you think, and I realise I'm kind of hanging around the issue probably a bit too much, but is it the solution for Tony Bellew to move up in weight, or is it a solution for any fighter to move up in weight? Does being happy in training camp, the fact that they don't have to watch their weight so much, take the edge away from a fighter? Isn't kind of cutting weight part of the whole discipline and enhances the performance?
I think certainly the attitude that you've got to cut weight as much as possible and be as big as you can for the division you're in is sort of traditional old school boxing thinking. I'm not sure it's a good idea. I think, that you're sort of, being angry, that has to come from within, not just from being dehydrated and grumpy.
Yeah, starving.
And I think, with some fighters, you see the fact that if they stay at the weight they fight at. Carl Froch is I think a prime example for living like a pro. I wonder if some of his durability has been down to the fact that he's not training himself to make the weight. It's not healthy having to dehydrate yourself the day before. You lose a lot in your performance if you're having to sort of do that to your body. So I think boxing will change in that attitude once sort of sports science gets more involved in it. I think there's something to be said about not hurting yourself to make the weight.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's really, really interesting. You mentioned Carl Froch, and that's what we'll finish on. Carl Froch and George Groves, little bit of history. They had their press conference at Wembley Stadium. There was quite a few whispers beforehand that it might go off. And it was all quite calm for a while. Froch seemed to be putting up with George Groves sitting there playing on his Rubik's Cube and what have you.
I was pretty impressed by that. I can't do a Rubik's Cube.
No, I can't. But my cousin can do it in really, really short space of time, which has always astonished me. But What does this say now? Because Froch had handled himself quite well. He didn't seem to be taking any of the bait.
And then he pushed him.
Now, this kind of thing happens, doesn't it? Should we don't need to judge too much. We don't need to look too much into this, do we?
Is it not our job to look too much into this? I think we need to over-egg this pudding.
Go on then.
He pushed him. Stop the press. All right, fine. It ultimately won't have any bearing on the fight itself, but we've got months to go to the fight itself, so we need to spill ink on something.
Yeah, I know. I take that, and I think a lot of people will be off that. But
I suppose, reading into it, it's a sign that Froch is rattled, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it certainly shows there's no that if they don't hate each other, they certainly dislike each other intensely. It's an odd thing to do because, you don't want it to kick off at a press conference because then the fight, if someone gets hurt, then the fight's off. I know Groves didn't fall over or anything and it was fine, but, you don't really want to put in jeopardy this gigantic payday that's coming up.
Froch has taken some stick for kind of very, very briefly losing his rag and giving George Groves a shove. Do you have any sympathy for Froch for what he did, in that Groves, obviously a man that annoys him a great deal, certainly more so than any other Froch opponent. He is getting on his nerves immensely. And as they come together, Groves is yattering away in his ear, no idea what he was saying, and Froch almost instinctively reaches his arms out and just shoves him off.
Yeah, and it was only a push. He didn't sort of punch him or slap him like Chisora did to Vitali at the way in. It was only a push, and no one got hurt. It didn't escalate. But I was surprised to see Froch do something like that because he's normally sort of prickly and spiky, but he is normally a consummate pro. So it's not something I expected from him. I want to know about Lee Froch, though. Where does he fit into this?
He's not. He doesn't seem to be doing his brother any favours as much as you might think that he is. If you were Carl Froch, would you advise perhaps his brother to stay away from the next press conference?
I would, definitely. I don't think it's winning Carl any fans, because and also it's either worse. Like Carl is doing the fighting, so in these press conferences and interviews, he can really say he can say pretty much what he wants within reason, obviously. Yeah. But Lee Froch isn't the one getting in the ring with George Groves, so it looks a bit like someone in a playground standing behind someone else's shoulder, waving their fist and hurling abuse. It's odd that Lee Froch just suddenly popped up and become a part of this, because we've watched Carl's career pretty closely. I don't remember his brother appearing really until now. But if once we get close to the fight, I think everyone will pretty soon forget about Lee Froch. I don't think he's a major actor in this event.
And I think, to be fair, we'll probably forget about this shove as well before too long. Prior to that, Froch did seem calm, a lot calmer than he did at this stage of the first fight. He seemed to be dealing with Groves a lot more. But how much can we take from this press conference? Is it an early indication that Groves is in Froch's head in the way that Froch isn't in Groves's? Is it an early indication that Froch has perhaps suffered a mental hangover slightly from the first fight and from the build-up to the first fight, and that he will find this fight exceptionally difficult to deal with mentally?
Yeah, I certainly you know, it's hard to say. I think the fight will come down to whatever goes on in their respective training camps and then how they execute it on the night. Having said that, Groves he seems like he's, you know, Froch may find him annoying, and plenty of people watching might find Groves annoying as well. But he certainly seems like he's maturing the way he's dealt with.
Right, let's keep chatting. So I've just noticed that the camera has gone off.
What does this mean?
That means that the camera's gone off. I'm not sure if we can still be heard, if the audio can continue. So we will.
But I can do anything and no one can see.
You can just go nuts now. You can get naked.
All right.
I'd rather you didn't.
All right. I was going to say I could pick my nose. No one would know.
Okay, well let's.
We'll do it your way.
Okay, well let's wrap it up there, because I have just spotted that the camera has. It looks like we've run out of memory.
But I was about to say something incisive.
Go on,
I don't know. I was going somewhere. Groves has matured. He's. Yeah, that'll do.
Okay. So thanks for that. If you can still hear us. If not, we'll catch you next time. Thank you for watching and listening, and remember to subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit the like button on Facebook. Comment or write a review on iTunes or Google Play. It only takes a minute, and it does loads to help us produce shows like these. The little lamb.
I want us to be both being shot together.
It's a bit close, man.
Push me.
Get away.
Are we in shot together? How is my hair?
You look like a man with no follicle problems.
Might just take a selfie.
Is that already recorded?
Yeah, no.
What are we on? Do you want to take a selfie?
Go on, take a selfie.
All right, hang on. It's complicated.
Apparently, if you take it from up high, it's more flattering. Not that I've ever taken a selfie.
My forehead. I look terrible, man. Seriously, I look like a terrorist. Sorry.
Okay, right, ready?
Fine.
Right.